I'm not one to share my life like a book on a shelf, waiting to be dusted off by curious eyes. But here I am, on this quiet, rainy afternoon in my cramped little kitchen, stirring the same pot of soup I've made for the last 10 years, thinking about the things I've lived through and the things I still don't quite understand. Maybe it's time to tell my story, if only to understand it better myself. My name is Carla Johnson, and I'm 50 years old. I never really expected to make it this far, honestly. Life has a way of knocking you down, sometimes without warning, other times with a precision that feels almost cruel. My story is one of survival, not just of me, but of the love I've poured into my daughter, Alexis. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a neighborhood that's seen better days. My skin is a deep shade of brown, one of the colors that have become so often associated with struggle and resilience. For years, I worked in the back of a rundown diner, slinging plates of greasy fries and burgers to people who barely noticed me. But I didn't mind the grind, I never did. Work was work, and as long as it paid the bills, I didn't complain. 15 years ago, I was a different person. I had my husband, Reggie, by my side. We lived in a small house near the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I loved him in a way I thought was invincible, like the way you love something you believe will always be there. But cancer came for him the way it comes for too many, quickly and without mercy. A year of treatments and hope that vanished too soon. And just like that, I was a widow, left holding the weight of a life I never thought I'd have to carry alone. But I wasn't really alone, was I? I had Alexis, my little girl, the one thing that kept me moving forward. When Reggie passed, Alexis was only 5. She couldn't understand why her daddy wasn't coming home anymore, and I couldn't figure out how to explain it. I think I spent the first year of her life without him in a fog, working, crying in the bathroom after she went to bed, trying to figure out how I was going to do this, how I was going to raise her right, how I was going to make sure she didn't miss the love of a father or the security of a home that felt whole. But I did the best I could because that's what mothers do, right? They give what they can't keep, all for the sake of a future they can't even see. I took whatever jobs I could find. I worked the late shifts at the diner. I cleaned houses for a little extra money. I picked up every odd job I could, just to make sure she had food on her plate and shoes on her feet. When I couldn't find work, I still tried to find a way to make something happen. For her. But you don't see how much a person can break until you're standing on the other side of it. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I'd lie awake in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the street outside. And I'd wonder how I'd gotten here, wondering if this was the best I could do. If I had it in me to be the kind of mother Alexis needed, was I enough? I could see the way she looked at me sometimes. She didn't say anything, but there was a distance in her eyes, something that wasn't there before. It was the kind of look I'd seen in other kids, the ones whose parents didn't have to worry about bills, about the next meal, about being enough. I remember feeling a pang in my chest every time I caught that look, a reminder that I wasn't giving her what she deserved. Alexis was a bright kid. She was beautiful too, with that smile that could light up the whole room and those eyes, so full of questions, full of curiosity about the world. She had dreams, big ones that I couldn't always reach. She wanted to go to the best schools, the ones her friends went to, the ones their parents could afford, the ones I couldn't even dream of. And it wasn't just school, it was everything. When she hit her teenage years, it became clear to me how much I was failing her in ways I couldn't even explain. She wanted new clothes, the kind that came with the right label on them. She wanted to go to parties, and even though I knew she was old enough to understand the value of money, she was a kid who didn't understand why we couldn't afford it. And I couldn't make her understand that the reason we didn't have it was because I worked a full shift just to pay the electric bill, and sometimes that meant we couldn't even buy the basics. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if she resented me, if she saw me as nothing more than a figure who handed her a half-empty glass when she wanted more. I couldn't tell her everything I wanted her to know, the things I knew she needed to hear, like how much I loved her, how much I would sacrifice just to see her smile. But all I could offer was a tired smile and a promise that things would be better, eventually. But what do you do when you're out of promises? What happens when the hope you've been holding on to finally starts to slip through your fingers like sand? I don't have the answers. Maybe I'm still looking for them. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized I couldn't keep pretending I was fine. The bills piled up, the repairs around the house were ignored because there was no money to fix them, and Alexis was getting older, becoming more independent, more distant. But despite everything, I kept going. I couldn't stop. I couldn't show her that I was weak. I had to keep pretending. I had to keep walking, keep trying to be the mother I thought she needed. And then one day something unexpected happened. Robert Harris walked into my life. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment, that single encounter, would change everything for me. It was just a regular Tuesday, the kind of day that blends into the background of life, when Robert, an older, well-dressed man, sat at the bar where I worked. He wasn't much different than any of the other regulars who came in, ordering the same thing every day. But there was something about him. Something in the way he talked to me, listened to me, like he saw me for more than just the tired waitress who served him coffee. That night, he handed me a business card and said, "If you ever need help, you let me know." And at first, I thought it was nothing more than a gesture. Maybe he was just being kind, but I was wrong. Robert didn't just give me help, he gave me a chance. A chance I didn't think I deserved. But for now, that's a story for another time, because before Robert, there was only me. Just me and Alexis and the weight of a life that seemed too big for us to bear. But I carried it anyway, because that's what mothers do. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we get through the pain, one step at a time. I was up before the sun, as usual. The light from the kitchen window crept through the blinds, barely enough to make out the worn-out counter where I set the coffee pot every morning. It was a small thing, a quiet moment before the world awoke. Alexis was still asleep, her soft breathing echoing from her room down the hall. It's funny how you can get used to the sounds of your life, the hum of the refrigerator, the squeak of the floorboards under my worn slippers. But there are days when you notice how the silence can sometimes feel louder than any noise. I filled the coffee pot, watching the steam rise from the bubbling water. There's something soothing about it. Maybe it's the familiarity, or maybe it's because I know that no matter how much the world changes, some things stay the same. The coffee, the quiet, and the sense that the day is waiting to be conquered. Alexis was growing up fast, too fast. I tried to hold on to her childhood as best I could, but I knew I couldn't stop the clock. She was no longer that little girl who would jump into my arms after school, the one who held my hand when we went to the store, the one who always needed me. No, Alexis was turning into a young woman, and I could see it in the way she carried herself now. She no longer looked up to me with the same innocent trust. She had become someone who questioned everything, someone who wanted more than I could offer. It stung sometimes, that distance. It wasn't her fault. She was growing up, and with it came the confusion of needing to know who she was outside of me. I didn't blame her for that. I was proud of the person she was becoming, even though it felt like a knife twisting in my chest every time I thought about how much I had to let go. But it didn't make the mornings any easier. That day was no different than the others. I grabbed the brown paper bag with the leftovers from last night's dinner and shoved it into my purse. Every penny counted, and I had to make sure that if I couldn't get her anything new, I could at least make sure she ate well. Alexis had a way of pretending everything was fine, but I knew better. Her grades were slipping, and every now and then I caught her staring out the window, lost in thought. I wanted to fix it, to pull her back from the edge she was walking, but I didn't know how. I threw on my coat and stepped out into the cold Atlanta morning, wrapping my arms tightly around myself. The bus stop wasn't far, but it might as well have been miles away. The streets always looked the same: cracked sidewalks, empty parking lots, the occasional stray cat crossing the street like it had somewhere to be. The neighborhood had its charm, but you had to look past the broken-down cars, the abandoned houses, and the feeling that everything was just hanging on by a thread. Work was the same as always. The diner was never busy early in the morning, but by noon, the place would be packed with people who didn't have the time to care about much beyond their own world. I stood behind the counter, refilling coffee cups, cleaning off tables, and pretending like everything was fine. The same routine every day, but I knew it wasn't fine. Not for me, not for Alexis. Alexis was my world, but she was also my greatest challenge. The truth was, I didn't know how to be a mother to a teenager. She was growing up, becoming someone I didn't entirely recognize. Sometimes she'd come home with a new attitude, her words sharper than they had been the day before. Other times, she'd be so quiet, I wondered if I was losing her altogether. I tried to talk to her about school, about her friends, but every conversation felt forced. She was shutting down, pulling away, and I didn't know how to stop it. There were days I wondered if I was doing everything wrong. Maybe if I had more money, I could give her the life she wanted. Maybe if I worked harder, if I sacrificed more, she'd see me as enough. But that wasn't how it worked, was it? You can give, and sometimes it's still not enough. I had spent years trying to shield Alexis from the truth of our situation, trying to make her think I had everything under control. But the truth was, I was barely holding it together. I was tired, so tired. The long nights, the late shifts, the constant worry. It wore on me, slowly but surely. When I'd come home late from work, I'd try to sneak into the kitchen without waking Alexis, but she always seemed to know when I was there. She'd be sitting in the living room, her head buried in a book or scrolling through her phone. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing up at me as I walked by, like she was waiting for something from me, and I would smile because that's what mothers do. But inside, I was breaking, because I couldn't give her what she needed. The night before, I found her sitting at the kitchen table long after she should have gone to bed. Her eyes were red and her homework was spread out in front of her untouched. Alexis, I said, my voice soft as I leaned against the door frame. She didn't look up. Just trying to figure out how to fix this, she said quietly. I walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. What's wrong? She shook her head as though the words were too heavy to say. I didn't press her, but I knew she was struggling. I saw it in the way she didn't talk to her friends anymore. I saw it in the way she looked at the world as though it didn't make sense. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't have the words to comfort her. I couldn't promise her things would get better because I didn't know how. All I could do was sit there next to her and remind her that I was still here, even when she couldn't see it. The next morning, I caught her leaving the house with a backpack full of books she hadn't touched in days. You going to school? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Yeah, she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I'll be fine. But I knew she wasn't fine, and I knew that deep down, no matter how much I tried, I couldn't fix everything. The best I could do was to keep moving forward one day at a time. I walked back to the kitchen and grabbed my purse, knowing that my day was just beginning. The world would keep spinning, and I would keep working. I had no choice. I had to keep going for her, for Alexis. But the truth is, I didn't know how much longer I could carry us both. The days blurred together in a haze of half-sleep, long shifts, and a gnawing feeling that something somehow was slipping through my fingers. The diner at least was familiar, predictable in its own way. But at home, things were changing. Alexis was changing. And I was starting to wonder if it was me who was losing touch with her, or if it was just a part of her growing up that I didn't know how to navigate. That night, when I finally arrived home after another grueling shift, I expected the usual. Alexis would be in her room, probably with the door slightly ajar, headphones on, shutting out the world. I'd make us both something to eat, probably more of last night's leftovers, and we'd pretend for a while that everything was okay. But tonight was different. The house was eerily quiet. I stood at the front door for a moment, listening for the sound of the TV, the faint hum of music, the scuff of her footsteps down the hall. But there was nothing. It was like the whole house was holding its breath. I tiptoed to her room, the door cracked open just enough to see her sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. The glow of the streetlights cast long shadows across her face, and for a moment I didn't recognize her. It wasn't just her appearance, her hair, the way she carried herself. It was her eyes. There was a sadness in them that had never been there before. Alexis? I said softly, unsure of how to break the silence. I didn't want to startle her, but I needed to say something, anything, to bridge the distance between us. She turned, her expression unreadable. Oh, hey, Mom, I didn't hear you come in. I closed the door quietly behind me, trying to keep my movements calm. Are you okay? She shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that only made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I'm fine, she said, but it was a lie. Her voice didn't have that usual teenage defiance, the one that said she wasn't going to let me in. This was something else. Something I didn't understand. I sat down beside her on the bed. glancing at the piles of books on her desk, the half-finished assignments, the papers that were crumpled and discarded like they didn't matter anymore. I could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on me. It was a silence that felt like a wall between us. And no matter how many times I tried to talk, I couldn't seem to get through. Alexis, I started, my voice more fragile than I intended. You don't have to go through this alone, you know. If something's bothering you, if you need to talk about it. She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her hands as though trying to gather the words that wouldn't come. It's not that simple, Mom. What do you mean? I asked gently, though I already felt like I knew the answer. We'd been skating around this for weeks now, but I was starting to realize how much I'd missed, how much I wasn't seeing. She let out a shaky breath and looked up at me, eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't place. I'm just so tired, Mom. I'm tired of pretending like everything's fine, like I don't see what's happening. My heart twisted in my chest as I took in her words. There it was, the unspoken truth hanging in the air between us. I didn't know how to respond, how to fix it. What do you mean, sweetie? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. What's happening? She turned her head toward the window again, the shadows on her face deepening. Everything, you're always working, I barely see you anymore. And when I do, it's like I have to take care of myself because you can't. You're too tired. You've always been too tired. The weight of her words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't know what to say because she was right. I was too tired. I had been for years. I tried to keep it together, tried to show her that I was strong, that I could handle it all, but deep down, I knew I was slipping. I couldn't keep up with her. I couldn't keep up with the life we were living, and she knew it. I never wanted you to feel like you had to take care of yourself alone, I said softly, my voice trembling. But I don't know how to make things better. You think I don't see it, but I do. I see the way you pull away, the way you stop asking for things. I see the way you're starting to look at me like I'm just a stranger. She shook her head quickly, as if to deny it. No, it's not like that. I just don't want to burden you. You've got enough on your plate already. I know what it's like to struggle, Mom. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I couldn't help the tears that started to well up in my eyes. The last thing I ever wanted was for Alexis to feel like a burden. The last thing I ever wanted was for her to feel alone, like I couldn't carry the weight for her anymore. I reached out and touched her arm, gently, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath my fingers. You're not a burden, Alexis, I whispered. You are my life, my everything. I don't know how to make it better for you. I don't know how to make it better for us. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then slowly, she turned toward me, her face softening. I know you're doing your best, Mom. I know, but sometimes I wish we had more than this. I wish I could give you that, baby, I said, my voice breaking as I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the situation. I really do. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. I know, Mom, but sometimes wishing isn't enough. The room was quiet again, the weight of everything hanging between us like a veil. And in that silence, I realized how much I had failed her. Not intentionally, but because I couldn't give her the things she needed, the things she deserved. Alexis, I began, but the words stuck in my throat. I didn't know what to say anymore. Maybe there was nothing left to say. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I just need to figure things out. I'm not mad at you. I just don't know what to do anymore. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't that she hated me or that she didn't love me. It was that she didn't know where to fit into this world anymore. She didn't know how to reconcile the mother she had with the life she wanted. I pulled her into a hug then, even though I wasn't sure if she wanted it. I didn't care, because sometimes that's all you can do, hold on, even when everything else is slipping through your fingers. I'm here, Alexis. Always, I whispered into her hair, though the words felt hollow in my own ears. She didn't say anything back, but she didn't pull away either. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could still make it through this. One day at a time. The morning light came too soon, as it always did. It pushed its way through the thin curtains of the living room, scattering soft shadows across the worn carpet. The house felt quieter today, heavier somehow, as if the silence between Alexis and I had stretched into something we both couldn't ignore any longer. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to say to make it better. All I could do was move through the motions. I was back at work, scraping by, running on empty. I could feel the weight of every shift I worked in my bones, aching in ways I couldn't explain. The late nights, the exhaustion that clung to me like a second skin, the constant worry that Alexis was slipping away just a little more each day. It was all wearing me down. But there was nothing else I could do. The bills kept coming. The rent had to be paid. Alexis needed clothes and food, and as much as it hurt to admit it, she needed more than I could give her right now. That's when he showed up. It was a Tuesday, just another day like the others. The diner was a bit busier than usual, and I was hustling between tables, refilling coffee cups, taking orders. I barely noticed him at first, an older man, impeccably dressed in a suit that looked out of place in our little diner. He sat alone at the far booth, reading a newspaper, his silver hair neatly combed back. He seemed like just another businessman passing through, stopping for a quick bite before heading back to whatever high-rise office he worked in. But when I approached his table to take his order, he looked up at me with a kind smile, and I noticed something else in his eyes. A softness, a knowing. It made me pause for a moment. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, trying to hide the exhaustion in my voice. He smiled again, this time more warmly. "Just coffee, please, and don't worry about rushing. Take your time." I nodded, still not thinking much of it, but there was something about him that made me feel a little less like a stranger to the world. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like he wasn't just seeing a waitress, but seeing me, if that made any sense. I went about my duties, but my mind kept drifting back to him. It wasn't until after the lunch rush, when the diner was quieter, that he called me over again. "Excuse me," he said, lowering his newspaper. "You're Carla Johnson, right?" I blinked, surprised that he even knew my name. "Yes, I am. How did you?" "I've been coming here for a while," he interrupted gently. "I notice things. You seem like someone who works hard, but I also sense that life hasn't been easy for you. Am I right?" His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't used to strangers acknowledging the weight of my life so directly. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond, but he smiled again, reassuring me that he wasn't judging. He wasn't trying to pry. "I know this might seem odd," he continued, his voice calm, "but I've been in situations where I've had to rely on others. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is accept help. But Carla, I think you could use a little help right now." My chest tightened. Was this some sort of charity? Was he going to offer me money, something I hadn't asked for and didn't want? It was a feeling I knew well, people offering help they thought you needed, without ever really understanding what you actually wanted or needed. "I don't," I started, but he held up his hand, stopping me before I could finish my sentence. "Please hear me out," he said, his voice steady. "I don't want to offer you a handout. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am offering you is a chance to get back some of what you've given away over the years. You've spent your whole life taking care of others, haven't you? And now, it's time for someone to take care of you, even if just for a little while." I wanted to argue, to tell him that I didn't need anyone's charity, that I was doing just fine on my own. But the words wouldn't come. I just stood there, silent, unsure of how to react to this stranger's kindness. "I'm Robert Harris," he said, extending his hand across the table. "I know this sounds strange, but I've been in your shoes. I've had to work hard to get where I am, and I understand how tough it can be. All I want to do is offer you a little relief, if you'd let me." I stared at his hand for a moment before slowly reaching out to shake it. There was something in the way he spoke, something in his demeanor, that made me believe he was genuine. I wasn't sure if I trusted it, but I couldn't bring myself to reject him either. "I don't know what to say," I muttered, feeling both overwhelmed and cautious. "You don't have to say anything." Robert replied softly. "Just think about it. I'm not offering you a solution to all your problems, but sometimes just a little bit of breathing room can make all the difference." I took a deep breath, still unsure of what I was feeling. Part of me wanted to decline, to walk away, to keep doing it all on my own. But another part of me, the part that was so tired, so worn out from carrying the weight of my own life, couldn't help but wonder if this man, this stranger, could offer something I had been missing for so long: hope. Robert left a few hours later, after finishing his meal and offering me a generous tip. As I cleared his plate, I noticed a small business card sitting on the edge of the table with just a few simple words written on it. "Call me if you ever need help, no strings attached." I didn't know what to make of it. The practical part of me wanted to crumple the card and forget about it. I didn't need help from anyone. I'd never asked for it. But the exhaustion in my bones, the quiet ache in my heart, told me a different story. Later that evening, after a long day of work, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business card in my hands. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some random gesture. Something in Robert's eyes, his voice, had made me feel like he saw me in a way I didn't even see myself anymore. And in a world where I had spent so long pretending I had everything under control, it felt strange and maybe even a little freeing to let someone else see me. I put the card down on the table, my fingers lingering on the edges. I wasn't ready to call him yet, not tonight, but maybe, just maybe, tomorrow I'd pick up the phone. Tomorrow, maybe, I'd find the courage to let someone help me for once. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would be like to not carry everything alone. I thought of Alexis, of how much I wanted to give her more than I ever could. Maybe this was the first step. Maybe Robert Harris was just a stranger. But sometimes, strangers offer us things we never knew we needed. The morning after Robert left the diner, I woke up to the same heavy silence that had become a permanent fixture in our home. Alexis had already gone to school, and the house felt empty, like the stillness after a storm. I sat in the kitchen, nursing my coffee, the warmth of the cup grounding me as my mind replayed the conversation I had with Robert over and over again. His words had stayed with me, like a strange echo I couldn't shake. I didn't call him, not that day, or the day after. It felt too soon, too vulnerable. There was something unsettling about needing help, about admitting that I couldn't handle everything on my own. I had spent years, no decades, proud of my ability to carry it all. To raise Alexis, to work multiple jobs, to juggle it all without asking for anything in return. But now, with Robert's offer hanging in the air like a lifeline, I didn't know how to reach for it. I thought about Alexis, about how she seemed even more distant lately, how she barely looked me in the eye when I asked her about her day, how the silence between us was growing heavier with each passing hour. I could feel the walls she was building, and I wasn't sure how to tear them down. I got up from the table and grabbed my phone. The business card from Robert was still on the counter, staring up at me, its edges crinkled from where I had picked it up and put it down so many times. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. I had spent so much time pretending, lying to myself about how strong I was, how much I could take. But that day, the truth felt harder to ignore. I dialed the number. The sound of the ringing seemed to echo in the stillness of the house, and with each passing second, my nerves grew. What was I doing? What was I even asking for? Hello? Robert's voice came through, calm and steady, as though he had been expecting my call. Hi, it's Carla Johnson. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, like it belonged to someone else. Carla, it's good to hear from you. His voice was warm, patient. I was hoping you'd call. I didn't know what to say after that. There was a silence, an awkward pause that stretched between us. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, if I was ready to open myself up to someone else. But I had reached out, hadn't I? I had already made the first step, even if it didn't feel like it. I don't know what to ask for, I finally said, my words coming out slower than I wanted. Things have been hard lately. With Alexis, with everything, I don't know how to fix it. Carla, Robert said, his tone gentle but firm, you don't have to fix everything on your own. Sometimes the hardest thing is just to admit that you need a little help. It's okay to not have all the answers. His words landed heavy in my chest. I felt like I had been holding my breath for years, always trying to do it all without asking for a break. And now, here he was, reminding me that it wasn't weak to need help, it was human. I don't want to burden you, I said quickly, even though I knew it wasn't true. I had been burdening myself for so long and it had become unbearable. You're not burdening me, he replied. That's not how this works. Let's just start small. Tell me what's been going on. I'm listening. And so I did. Slowly at first, the words came haltingly, as if I hadn't spoken them aloud in years. I told him about Alexis, how she had changed, how she had started to pull away from me, how I didn't know how to help her, how I felt like I was losing her. I told him about the struggles I faced, working late hours, never being able to catch up on bills, always feeling like I was a step behind. For the first time in a long time, I felt heard. It wasn't just talking into the void. Robert wasn't interrupting, wasn't offering solutions, just listening. And that in itself was enough to break something inside me. I had been holding on to everything, all the pain, the worry, the fear, without sharing it with anyone. It felt like a dam was finally starting to crack. When I finished, the silence was comfortable, not heavy. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I know it's hard, Carla, Robert said softly, but it sounds like you've been doing the best you can. You've been carrying this burden alone for so long, and it's okay to ask for help. You're not alone in this. You don't have to do it all by yourself. I didn't know how to respond. His kindness, his understanding, it felt like too much, like I didn't deserve it. But at the same time, it felt like a lifeline I couldn't afford to ignore. I had never let anyone in, never allowed myself to be vulnerable. But now, sitting in the quiet of my kitchen, I realized how much I had been starving for connection. For someone to just see me for who I was, not just the mother or the worker, but the woman who was struggling too. I don't know what to do next, I whispered. I'm scared that I'll make things worse, that I'll lose Alexis for good. You won't lose her, Robert said, his voice steady. But you have to give yourself some grace, Carla. You can't keep sacrificing yourself and expect everything to be okay. You've got to take care of you too. That's the only way you can be there for Alexis. Start small, ask for help when you need it, and most importantly, take some time for yourself. You've been running on empty for too long. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. There was something in his words that resonated deep inside me. I had been so focused on what was wrong, on trying to fix things that I had forgotten to take care of myself. Thank you, I said, the words feeling too simple for the weight of the gratitude I felt. I'll think about it. I'm here whenever you need me, Carla, Robert said. No pressure, just take your time. We hung up shortly after, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely overwhelmed by everything. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. Later that evening, as Alexis walked through the door, her face drawn with exhaustion, I was surprised to find that I wasn't immediately filled with anxiety. For once, I didn't feel the overwhelming urge to fix everything in a single moment. Instead, I gave her a smile, a genuine one, the kind I had forgotten how to give. How was your day? I asked, trying to sound casual, as if the distance between us hadn't been growing for weeks. She shrugged, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Same as usual. I made dinner, I said, gesturing to the small meal I had prepared. You want to sit down and eat with me? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We sat together at the kitchen table, eating in silence. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe we weren't where we wanted to be yet, but at least for tonight, we were together. And that was enough for me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. The weeks that followed felt like a strange balancing act, teetering between the comfort of small changes and the constant fear that things could slip back into the way they were. The mornings were no longer just a blur of routine, but something I approached with more intention. And at night, when the world outside was quiet, I found myself thinking more about what Robert had said, that I needed to take care of myself too. It wasn't an easy lesson to swallow, but I was starting to realize how much I had neglected my own well-being in the process of caring for everyone else. But as much as I tried to be more mindful of myself, the distance between Alexis and me remained. It wasn't just the silent meals we shared or the brief exchanges before she left for school. There was a wall there, one I couldn't quite see but could feel in every word we spoke. Alexis had stopped arguing with me, but I couldn't decide if that was a sign of peace or surrender. I still couldn't read her. She didn't talk to me the way she used to. There were no more long chats after dinner or spontaneous hugs when she needed comfort. She was closing off, and I didn't know how to break through the barrier she'd built around herself. One night, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I heard Alexis in her room. The door was half open, and I could just make out the soft murmur of her voice. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my heart tighten. I hadn't heard her talk to anyone in a while, not like this. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk in, to ask who she was talking to, but another part of me was afraid of what I might find. Maybe it was just a friend on the phone. Maybe it was just her trying to make sense of the things she didn't feel comfortable saying to me. But I couldn't resist. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. Alexis was sitting on the edge of her bed, her phone pressed to her ear. She was talking in low tones, her face unreadable. She was so absorbed in the conversation that she didn't notice me standing in the doorway. I just don't know what to do anymore, she said, her voice shaky. Mom is trying, but it's not enough. I feel like I'm suffocating here. I don't know how to get out of it. I'm stuck. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't talking to me. She wasn't talking about me. She was talking about how I wasn't enough. My stomach churned as I listened, unsure if I should step forward or retreat. But before I could decide, Alexis spoke again. I don't know. I feel like I'm losing myself, like everything is spinning out of control and nobody even sees it. I don't know if I'm even ready for this, for everything, you know? I stood there, frozen in the doorway, hearing the pain in her voice, hearing her confusion. She was trying so hard to hold it all together, and yet here I was, thinking I was the one carrying the weight, but she was too. She had been for a long time, and I had failed to see it. The silence that followed her words was thick, heavy, like a fog I couldn't clear. I wanted to go to her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay, but the words stuck in my throat. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us. This was about how we had both been living in the same house, under the same roof, and yet we were worlds apart. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if Alexis even knew I had heard her. If she did, she didn't say anything. She just sat there, lost in her thoughts as though nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I could feel it in the air, thick with unspoken words. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The next day after school, Alexis came home to find me sitting on the couch, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for her. She looked surprised to see me waiting for her, as though she hadn't expected me to be there at all. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I had no script for this, no idea how to make it right, but I knew I had to say something. The silence between us had become too loud. Alexis, we need to talk, I said softly, my voice shaky but determined. She didn't move at first. She just stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes avoiding mine. About what? About everything, I said, feeling the lump in my throat grow. About how things have been between us lately. I know you've been struggling, I can see it. She scoffed, shaking her head. Mom, I'm fine, really? No, you're not, I said, my voice catching. You're not fine, and neither am I. I've been so focused on working, on keeping everything together, that I've completely missed how much you're hurting, how much we're both hurting. Alexis looked at me then, her face unreadable, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, anything. But she just stood there, silent, as if she was afraid to open up, as if she had built her own wall too. I heard you last night, I said, my voice quiet but firm. On the phone, with your friend, I know you're struggling, and I need you to know that it's okay to feel that way. I'm here for you. I've always been here for you, even if it doesn't feel like it. Her eyes widened, and I saw the shift in her. She took a step toward me, then hesitated. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. I didn't mean for you to hear that, she whispered. I know you didn't, I said gently. But it's not about what you meant, it's about what you need. It's about us not pretending anymore. I'm not perfect, Alexis. I've made mistakes, but I love you, and I'll always be here, even when it doesn't feel like it. For the first time in weeks, she stepped closer to me. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. She was ready. She was willing to break down the wall, slowly, so slowly, but it was a start. I don't know how to fix this, Mom, she said, her voice small. I don't know how to stop feeling like everything is falling apart. You don't have to fix it all at once, I said, standing up to meet her halfway. We'll do it together. We'll take it one step at a time, but we have to talk. We have to be honest with each other. And so we did. For the first time in a long time, we sat together on the couch, not as mother and daughter who had been at odds, but as two people who had been carrying their pain alone for far too long. We spoke honestly about the things that had hurt us, the things we had been afraid to say, and the things we still didn't know how to fix. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a beginning, and that in itself was enough. That night, I tucked Alexis into bed for the first time in a long time. I kissed her forehead, and she hugged me back, holding me just a little bit tighter than usual. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, we were okay, and that was enough. It wasn't easy, that night of talking. We spent hours together, just sitting there, not solving anything, but slowly starting to break apart the walls we'd both been building for so long. Alexis had opened up more than I expected, revealing things I hadn't seen, things I hadn't even known she was struggling with. It wasn't a magic moment, but it was something real. Something that felt like it might just be the beginning of something better. The next morning, however, the silence was still there. It wasn't the thick, uncomfortable silence we'd lived with before, but the quiet that comes after you've said things you can't unsay. It lingered like the calm after a storm. A fragile calm. I woke up early like I always did. The house was quiet, too quiet for my liking. Alexis had left for school before I had even gotten up. I knew that this was part of the process, part of her trying to figure out what she wanted, what she needed from me, but it didn't make it any easier to be alone with the space between us. I moved through my morning routine with mechanical precision. Coffee, breakfast, getting ready for work. But as I sat at the kitchen table, I realized how much I was trying to distract myself. I didn't want to face the reality of the conversations we'd had, didn't want to think about what came next. But then, just as I was about to leave for work, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Alexis. "Mom, I need to talk when I get home." My heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, but they carried weight like the calm before another storm. I stared at the screen for a long moment. What did she need to talk about? Was this going to be another hard conversation? Was it going to bring us closer or push us further apart? I quickly typed back, "Of course, sweetie. I'm here whenever you're ready." But even as I sent the message, I wasn't sure if I meant it. I wasn't sure if I was ready. The truth was, we had started to scratch the surface of our issues, but there were so many layers left, so many things unsaid. I went to work, my mind racing the entire time, replaying the conversation Alexis and I had the night before. It wasn't just the things she said, it was the things she didn't say. The way she hesitated when she told me how she was feeling. The way she still wasn't sure how to let me in. How could I fix that? Could I fix it? By the time I got home that evening, the house felt like a foreign place. It was quiet again, too quiet. Alexis's school bag was on the couch, but there were no signs of her. I wandered through the house looking for her, only to find her sitting on the back porch, staring out at the small patch of garden we had. "Hey," I said softly, stepping outside and sitting beside her. "You wanted to talk?" She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, her knees pulled up to her chest, looking out at the fading light. I could feel her pulling away again, just a little bit. The weight of it settled in my chest. "I don't know how to do this, Mom," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "I don't know how to fix me." I didn't say anything at first, just letting her speak. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes, but there was something in her voice, something raw and broken, that made my heart ache for her. "You don't have to fix anything, Alexis," I said, my voice steady but gentle. "You don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out either." She turned to look at me then, her eyes filled with tears she hadn't let fall until now. I reached out to her, not knowing if she'd want to be held or if she'd pull away. But she leaned into me, her body shaking with the weight of everything she had been carrying. "I just feel like I'm failing you," she whispered. "You've always been there for me, and I can't even be there for you. I don't know how to be the daughter you need." Her words pierced me like a knife. How could she think that? How could she think that she was failing me? "No, baby, you're not failing me," I said, holding her tight. "You've been carrying this weight alone for so long, and I haven't been there like I should have been, but you're not failing me. We're in this together." She cried then, not just the soft sniffles that came with the exhaustion of the day, but full, heavy sobs that made my heart ache. I held her, rocking her gently, wishing I could take away all of her pain, all of the confusion she had been feeling. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered between sobs. "I didn't know how to tell you." I stroked her hair, not knowing what to say, but knowing that silence wasn't the answer. "It's okay, Alexis. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out one step at a time." She pulled away slightly, looking up at me, her face still streaked with tears. But there was something softer in her expression now, something that hadn't been there before. A hint of hope, like she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "I'm scared," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of everything, of being so far away from you, of not being good enough. I feel like I'm just waiting for everything to fall apart again." I wiped away a tear from her cheek, my own eyes brimming with tears I hadn't let fall. I'm scared too, I admitted. Scared of losing you. But we're not going to let it fall apart, Alexis. We're going to rebuild together. For a long time, we sat there, just the two of us, under the fading light of the day. The world around us felt still, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to change. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about fixing everything right away. It was about allowing ourselves to feel what we needed to feel and then moving forward, slowly but surely. I didn't have all the answers, but I did know this. I wasn't going to give up on Alexis, and I wasn't going to give up on us. I think I'm ready to try, Mom, Alexis said quietly, her voice tentative but stronger than before. I'm ready to let you in. I just don't know how. You don't have to know how, I said, squeezing her hand. We'll figure it out as we go, together. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. We were going to be okay. Not perfect, not without struggles, but together. And that was enough. The next few days passed in a haze of small victories and quiet moments, each one a reminder that we were moving forward, even if it didn't always feel like it. Alexis and I had begun to rebuild something between us, a fragile thread of trust and understanding that I was afraid to shatter. But there were days, good days, when it felt like we were finally starting to understand each other again. She came home earlier from school now, and we sat together more often, talking about things other than the weight that had been pulling us apart. I'd catch glimpses of the girl she used to be, the one who could make me laugh until my stomach hurt, the one who would burst into my room and demand that I listen to the latest song she'd discovered. It was as if, for the first time in months, we were finding each other again. But there were still days when the distance would creep back in, when she would retreat into herself again, just as she always had. I tried not to take it personally, but there was a part of me that still couldn't shake the fear that things would unravel once more. I was terrified of slipping back into the silence, the kind where words became too hard to say. That morning, after Alexis had left for school, I found myself staring at the kitchen table, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. And yet, I couldn't help but feel like there was still something missing, something I couldn't quite name. I picked up my phone and glanced at the screen. There was still no word from Robert. I hadn't called him back since that first conversation. I wasn't sure why I had hesitated. It wasn't like I had anything to lose by accepting his offer of help. But something about the whole thing felt complicated. I wasn't used to leaning on anyone else. I wasn't used to not doing everything myself. The phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from Robert. Just checking in. I know things have been heavy, but I wanted to remind you that I'm still here if you need anything. No pressure, just an offer to help. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt almost too easy, too generous. In a way, I knew I should reach out to him. But part of me was still holding back, afraid that once I did, I'd have to admit that I couldn't handle everything on my own. That I was still falling short, still struggling in ways I didn't want to face. I set the phone down without replying, the words lingering in my mind. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe just a sign that it was okay to ask for help, that it wouldn't mean I was weak or incapable or a failure. I didn't have an answer for that, not yet. By the time Alexis came home, I had pushed the thought of Robert to the back of my mind, focusing instead on her, on the little moments we could still share. How was school today? I asked as she dropped her bag by the door, looking tired but not withdrawn like she had been before. Same as usual, she muttered, tossing her jacket over the back of the couch, but there was something different in the way she said it. She wasn't hiding, not this time. I could see the effort it took for her to keep that wall up. I watched her for a moment, wondering how to approach it. I knew I had to say something, but what? How much of her pain should I uncover? How much was she ready to share? You know, you don't have to keep everything bottled up, right? I said, my voice gentle. If something's bothering you, you can talk to me. You don't have to hold it all in. She flinched at my words just for a second, but I could see her struggling with the idea of letting herself be vulnerable. She was trying to figure out how to trust me again, how to trust us again, and I wasn't sure how much of that was my responsibility to fix. I know, she replied quietly, but the words didn't feel like they reached me. They were a mask, one I had seen too many times before. I'm just tired, Mom. I don't know how to fix this stuff. I moved to sit next to her on the couch, not wanting to push but needing to be close. It's okay to not know how, sweetie. You don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out either. She looked at me then, really looked at me. For a moment, I saw the girl I had been missing, the one who still needed me, who still wanted me. She reached over, pulling me into a hug without saying a word. It wasn't a perfect hug. There were still things we hadn't said, things we weren't ready to confront, but it was enough. It was a beginning. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered into my shoulder. I've been so messed up lately. I don't know how to fix it. You don't have to fix anything, Alexis, I said softly, holding her tightly. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to figure it out together. We stayed like that for a while, just sitting there, letting the silence between us be something different. It wasn't the heavy silence of isolation, but the quiet that comes when two people who care about each other finally allow themselves to just be. We didn't have to solve everything right then. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were on the right path. Later that night, as Alexis headed to bed, I stood at the kitchen counter, my hands absent-mindedly wiping down the surface. My thoughts wandered again, back to the text from Robert. I was no closer to figuring out what I needed or what I was willing to accept. But I realized something then. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to carry everything on my own. What I needed, what we needed, was the space to heal, to be imperfect, to let ourselves lean on each other when the world was too heavy to carry alone. The phone sat there, silent, on the kitchen counter. I picked it up again, staring at the message. Maybe tomorrow, I thought. Maybe tomorrow I'd take that first step. But for tonight, I was here, with Alexis, with myself, and that was enough for now. The next day came quietly, as mornings always did. But this time, there was a shift. It was in the way Alexis had greeted me that morning, the way she didn't pull away when I kissed her goodbye, or the way her eyes held mine just a little longer than usual. There was something different, something that felt like a subtle promise. Maybe we weren't completely healed, but we were both trying, and that was a start. The phone sat on the counter, untouched. I had every intention of calling Robert back. I'd even convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, I could ask for the help he'd offered without feeling guilty or weak. But each time I picked up my phone, the words felt too big, too vulnerable, and I found myself setting it back down. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite grasp. On the one hand, I wanted to reach out to Robert, to let him help me the way he had offered. But on the other hand, I was afraid. Afraid that once I took that step, it would mean I was admitting I couldn't do it all, that I was finally admitting to myself that I needed more than what I was giving. That evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find Alexis sitting on the couch, her homework spread out in front of her. For the first time in weeks, she was actually focused. The pages in front of her littered with notes and highlighted sections. It was such a small thing, but it was a victory. A sign that she was trying too. "How was school today?" I asked casually, sitting down beside her. "Okay," she said, not looking up at me. "Just long, a lot of work to catch up on." I nodded, watching her scribble down something on her notebook. For a moment, I thought about how easy it would have been to let the silence grow again, to let things drift back to how they were. But I couldn't do that, not this time. "Alexis," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about how you're feeling about everything, and I just wanted to let you know that you don't have to carry all of this alone. You can talk to me. You can tell me what's going on inside, even if it's hard. I'm not going anywhere." Her pen paused in midair. She didn't look at me, but I could see the way her shoulders tensed. The silence between us was thick again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This one felt different, like something was building, something unsaid that was finally ready to be heard. "I know, Mom," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to make you worry. You've been doing so much already. I didn't want to add to it." I felt the sting of her words. How had I missed that? How had I not seen how much she was carrying? She was a teenager, but she had taken on the weight of a much older soul, trying to protect me from her pain when I should have been protecting her. "You're not adding to anything, Alexis," I said gently. "You don't have to protect me. You don't have to carry it all. That's not what family is for. We're supposed to be here for each other. You're not a burden. I want to know what's going on with you. I want to be there." She turned her head then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, trust. She looked at me as though she was finally seeing me, really seeing me for the first time in months. I just don't know what to do anymore, she said, her voice cracking. I feel like I've been pretending for so long, pretending that I'm okay, but I'm not. I don't know how to be okay anymore. I don't know how to fix it. I reached out and pulled her into a hug, not knowing what else to do. For a moment, we just held each other, the weight of everything finally settling in. It wasn't a perfect hug, and it didn't fix everything, but it was real. It was raw. You don't have to fix anything, Alexis, I whispered into her hair. You're not broken, and you don't have to do it alone. We'll figure it out together. She pulled back slightly, looking up at me, her eyes still filled with unshed tears. But I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared of everything. Scared of failing, scared of losing you, scared of losing myself. My heart ached for her. I didn't have all the answers, but I had something to offer. My love, my presence, my commitment to being there. And in that moment, that was enough. I'm scared too, I admitted, wiping a tear from her cheek. I'm scared of losing you, of not being able to protect you from everything that's out there. But I'm not going to stop fighting for us. For you, I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. A small, hesitant smile crept onto her lips. The first one I'd seen in days. Thanks, Mom, she said softly. I'm really glad you're here, and that was enough. For that moment, it was everything. Later that evening, as I sat in the quiet of the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something important, something that had been missing between us for so long. Alexis and I were starting to rebuild, to take the small steps toward understanding each other again. I didn't know where the road would lead, but I was ready to walk it with her. But there was still something unsettled inside me, something I couldn't ignore. I thought about Robert's message again, about the help he'd offered. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was holding onto a part of myself I wasn't ready to let go of. Asking for help felt like admitting defeat, like I was no longer strong enough to handle everything on my own. But maybe that wasn't the truth. Maybe, just maybe, asking for help was the most courageous thing I could do. The phone sat there again, waiting. And this time I felt ready. Ready to reach out, ready to accept that I didn't have to do everything by myself. It was a small step, but it was one I needed to take. I picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and dialed Robert's number. The phone rang twice before Robert picked up. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles went white. I hadn't realized how much I was holding my breath until he answered, his voice calm and steady, just like it had been when we first spoke. Hello, Carla. It's good to hear from you. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how much I'd been hesitating. Hi, Robert, I said, my voice shaking just a little. I've been thinking about what you said, and I think I'm ready to accept your help. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I wondered if I'd said the wrong thing, if I had made some huge mistake by admitting that I needed help. But then Robert's voice came through, warm and understanding. I'm glad you called, Carla, he said. It takes a lot of courage to reach out, and I'm happy to be here for you. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I didn't know what to say next. It felt strange to be admitting I couldn't handle everything, that I wasn't invincible, that I was human. But in that moment, I realized that I had been trying to be strong for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable. And maybe that was where I'd gone wrong all along. I don't know what this will look like yet, I said, my voice small, but I need something to help us both. To help me be a better mother, a better person. Don't worry about the details yet, Carla, Robert said gently. One step at a time. Let's start with what you need right now. How can I help you today? I let out a shaky breath, grateful for his patience. I think I need someone to talk to, someone who isn't going to judge me, someone who won't think I'm failing. You're not failing, Robert replied quickly, his tone firm but kind. And you don't have to do this alone. You've already taken the hardest step by asking for help, and that's something to be proud of. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight on my shoulders begin to lighten just a little. It wasn't gone, not yet, but the act of reaching out to someone who truly understood what I was going through made the burden feel less overwhelming. I've been so focused on trying to make everything perfect for Alexis. I continued, but I haven't been looking at myself. I've been ignoring my own needs, my own struggles, and I think that's why things have been so hard. Robert was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him nodding on the other end. You've been carrying so much, Carla, but you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself too if you want to be there for Alexis. His words felt like a revelation. I had always prided myself on being strong, on keeping everything together, on being the pillar for Alexis. But in doing that, I had neglected the one person who needed care the most, myself. And now, standing here, finally admitting that I couldn't do it all on my own, I realized just how much I had been denying myself. I think I've been scared, Robert, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Scared that if I let go of this idea that I have to be strong all the time, then I'll lose control. I'll lose myself, and I'll lose Alexis. You're not going to lose control, Robert said, his voice reassuring. It's okay to let go, Carla. It's okay to need help. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And if you want to be the mother Alexis needs, you have to start by taking care of yourself. I nodded again, this time more to myself than to him. His words settled deep inside me, like a quiet understanding I had been missing for so long. The weight I had carried for so many years didn't have to be mine alone. I didn't have to fix everything by myself. I've been scared of reaching out to you, I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice surprising me. I didn't want to feel like I was asking for too much. You're not asking for too much, Robert said, his voice warm. You're just asking for support, and we all need that sometimes. Don't be afraid of it. We talked for a little while longer about small things, about my work, about Alexis. But most of all, we talked about the things I had been too afraid to admit to myself, the things I had been bottling up for years. Robert listened, offering advice when needed, but mostly just letting me talk, letting me process everything I had been holding inside. By the time we ended the conversation, I felt lighter. Not completely free of the weight, but less burdened. And that was enough for now. That evening, after Alexis came home from school, I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. She looked at me, her face softening as she noticed the change in my demeanor. Mom, she asked, her voice hesitant. You okay? I smiled at her, the first genuine smile I'd felt in days. Yeah, I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than I've been in a long time. Alexis tilted her head, sensing something different in me. What happened? You're acting different. I think I'm starting to understand that it's okay to ask for help, I said, my voice steady, even if my heart was still fluttering in my chest. I've been trying to do it all on my own for so long, and it hasn't been working, but I'm learning that it's okay to lean on other people when you need to. She didn't say anything right away, just sat down across from me, her eyes searching my face as though trying to understand the change. For a moment, I wasn't sure if she'd accept it, if she'd understand. And then, after a long silence, she nodded slowly. I think I get it, she said softly. It's okay to need help sometimes, right? I smiled again, this time with more confidence. Exactly. She smiled back, a small but meaningful gesture. And just like that, the gap between us didn't seem so wide anymore. We weren't fixed, not by a long shot, but we were starting to heal together. That night, after Alexis went to bed, I sat on the porch looking out at the stars. It felt like the world was holding its breath, like everything was on the cusp of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The path ahead wasn't clear, but I was ready to walk it, one step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, asking for help wasn't such a bad thing after all. It's funny how things work out when you stop pretending. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to ask for help, you realize that the weight doesn't always have to be carried alone. Over the last few weeks, things had started to change in ways I didn't expect. Small moments, tiny victories, these were the things that made up our new reality. Every day wasn't perfect, of course. There were still struggles, still misunderstandings, still the heavy weight of everything we hadn't yet said. But we were working through it. Alexis and I had started to build something again, something solid. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The conversations with Robert had been a turning point for me, but it was the moments with Alexis that made everything feel possible. Her smile, the way she opened up a little more each day, the way she'd hug me without hesitation, these were the things that told me we were going to be okay. I remember one evening, a few weeks after I'd called Robert, when Alexis came home from school and plopped down beside me on the couch. We didn't need words. She just rested her head on my shoulder, And for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew we were in this together. It wasn't the perfect solution, the perfect family, but it was real. I was thinking about what you said. Alexis said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, our homework and school papers scattered around us, about how we don't have to have everything figured out. I think I'm starting to understand that. It's hard sometimes. I know, I said, smiling softly. I've learned that too over the years. We don't have to have it all figured out. We just have to keep trying, keep moving forward one day at a time. She nodded, the weight in her eyes not as heavy as it had been before. She was growing, changing, and I couldn't have been prouder of the young woman she was becoming. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about acceptance, patience, and love. I had also learned something new, something I hadn't been ready to admit before. I couldn't be everything to Alexis. I couldn't fill every role, meet every need, be her perfect mother. But I could show up for her. I could be the best version of myself. One step at a time, and that was enough. We didn't have to fix everything all at once. We just had to keep going. That weekend, Robert invited me to meet with him for coffee. I was nervous at first, but when I sat across from him in that small, quiet cafe, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't expected. It wasn't about finding all the answers. It was about having someone who understood, someone who wasn't going to judge me, someone who had seen the struggle and still believed in the possibility of growth. We talked about everything, about my journey, about Alexis, about how hard it had been to let go of the illusion that I had to be strong all the time. And through it all, Robert just listened. He didn't offer me solutions, he just gave me the space to speak my truth. I can't tell you that everything will be perfect, Robert said, sipping his coffee, but I can tell you that you're doing better than you think. You've already come a long way. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Thank you, Robert. I don't know how to repay you for all of this. You don't have to, he said with a smile. Just keep moving forward, that's enough. As the weeks went by, things didn't always go smoothly. There were still difficult days, moments when Alexis shut down or when I felt overwhelmed. But every time we stumbled, we learned something new. And every time we made a breakthrough, we celebrated it, no matter how small. I kept telling myself that it didn't matter how long it took. We would get there, one step at a time. And one evening, when I came home from work to find Alexis sitting at the kitchen table, her schoolwork in front of her but her face illuminated by the soft glow of the table lamp, I realized something important. We had gotten here. We had made it through the hardest parts. Alexis looked up as I walked in, and for the first time in a long while, there was no wall between us. She smiled at me, and in that smile, I saw hope, trust, and the unspoken understanding that we were finally starting to heal. I'm proud of you, Alexis, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She looked at me for a moment, then said softly, I'm proud of you too, Mom. And that was all I needed to hear. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that's happened over the past few months, I realize that the journey isn't over. There are still days when it feels like too much. There are still moments when I doubt myself, when I wonder if I'm doing enough. But I've learned something important, something I never would have understood if I hadn't taken that first step toward asking for help. We are not meant to do this alone. Life is messy and complicated, and sometimes the only way to make it through is by leaning on others. And that's okay. We all need support. We all need to feel seen. We all need to be reminded that we are enough. To my dear readers, thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for letting me share my story with you, for allowing me to express the messy, complicated beauty of life. I hope you found something here that resonates with you, that reminds you that it's okay to ask for help, to admit when you're struggling, and to trust that things can get better. May your journey be full of healing, growth, and love. May you always remember that you are not alone, no matter how heavy the world may feel. There is strength in vulnerability, and there is always hope, even in the darkest of times. I wish you all the best, good health, happiness, and a family filled with love and support. Keep moving forward, and know that no matter what happens, you are enough. Thank you, and may your life be filled with light.